Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. For today's video, I'm creating several cards using stamps by Hera Arts. Now these are color layering stamps, and these are fantastic because you can create some stunning images with a lot of color and depth just by layering several shades of ink. Now here's a quick look at how I store my ink cubes. I've got them all sorted by brand, and I've got them all in this Tim Holtz tin cans. And then of course my swatches, courtesy of Jennifer McGuire. She has these on her website as downloads, and then you would just use an ink swatch stamp to stamp out your colors so that you know what you have. One of the best tips I can give you for using layering stamps is it makes it really easy and convenient to use a stamp positioner tool. For today's projects, I'm using my Mini Misty, but anything will do. For my first example, I'm using the color layering Monarch butterfly. I'm stamping the most solid layer with my lightest shade of ink. And then my second layer, I'm going in with just a little bit of a darker shade. And then finally the last layer, which is the outline, I am stamping with black ink. One of the quickest and easiest ways to enhance a background is to add some ink by ink blending with the blending tool. I'm using the life-changing blender brushes by Picket Fences. And all I'm doing is taking the brush and adding my ink to it, blotting off any excess ink, and then I can just add it to my cardstock. This is a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock, and I'm using Wilted Violet Distress Oxide inks to add some shading, and I'm just starting in the bottom right hand corner, and I'm adding shading and pulling that color up to fade it out and soften the edges. Here I'm taking my frame that I plan to use, and I'm just measuring out how far I need to take that color up. I do add a little bit more, and then once I'm happy with that end result, I'll go ahead and die cut that panel with the stitched rectangle die. This card is going to be a clean and simple card design, and all I did to complete this card was I stamped my sentiment in the top right hand corner using Versamark ink. Then I popped up the panel on some fun foam. I've adhered it to a black card base. I also have my focal point image that I used my scan and cut to die cut, and I've got that popped up also on some fun foam. And then I'm just using a little bit of liquid adhesive to add that and glue it into place. For a couple of final touches, I am using the Studio Katya Mix 1 clear drops. I've got those arranged in the top and bottom of the panel, and then I can just adhere those with some liquid glue. And then for a little bit of shimmer on my butterfly, I am using the Spectrum Noir Clear Overlay Glitter Pen just to add some shimmer to the darkest part of that butterfly. For my next example, I am bringing in a background stamp. Background stamps are a great tool that allows you to create some inked pattern backgrounds to complement the focal point image. For my second card, I'm using the Hera Arts Rings Bold Prints. I am using my Tim Holtz stamping platform to make this process a little bit easier. And all I'm doing is inking up the background stamp using Mermaid ink by Fawn onto a piece of Nina Solar White 110-pound cardstock. I go ahead and ink that up a couple of times, and then I press my platform down firmly into place to transfer the image. For some added texture, I decided to add clear embossing powder, and after I was done stamping with the Mermaid ink, all I did was go over my stamping with Versamark ink, and then I can add the clear embossing powder and heat set that in place. Off screen, I cut the panel down to 4 by 5.5. Once again, I picked out my focal point images, and this one is by Hero Arts. This one is the color layering Goldfish. Here is the template on the back of the packaging that shows you which shades to use. And so for my particular images, I decided not to follow the suggested colors, but I am picking my fish to be pink. I'm stamping the most solid layer with a light pink ink. And for these particular images, I am using Altenew's dye ink. My second layer goes right on top of that. Sorry about my head in the way. And then the shade just a little bit lighter. I'm sorry, darker than the previous. And then finally the outline of the gill and the eyes and the mouth. I use a pretty dark shade of pink. I do go ahead and stamp out both of the images of the larger goldfish and the smaller goldfish, and then I use the coordinating dies to cut those out. I stamped the sentiment "Just Keep Swimming" onto a piece of black cardstock, and then I white heat embossed it. I also trimmed it up, and I'm just using my T-square ruler to line it up so that it's straight. I've got the background panel and the sentiment strip and the images all popped up on Fun Foam, and I'm just using some liquid adhesive to add those into place. To finish this card off, I am using the Studio Katya clear drops again. I've sort of arranged them to mimic the bubbles that fish would sometimes give off. And so I've just got those in place and I'm gluing them using some liquid adhesive. The next card I wanted to share with you is very similar to the previous one. The difference is I'm using a colored cardstock for the background, and I'm going to do a little bit of tone-on-tone stamping. Again, I am using the Mermaid Fawn ink and the same Hero Arts background stamp. I treated my cardstock panel with some anti-static powder. This removed any static. And then I can ink up my background stamp with the dye ink. And I've done that a couple of times. I stamped it out. And then again, I'm using my Versamark ink. I'll just go right directly over that stamp. I don't bother to clean it off or anything. And once I have that inked up, I can press that into place and use my clear embossing powder and heat set it. I trimmed the panel to 4 by 5.5 so that only a little bit of the black cardstock peeks on the sides. I stamped the sentiment from the set and I white heat embossed it. I'm just adding some fun foam to the back of that strip after I die cut it. And then I can just use some liquid adhesive to glue it into place. I have the background panel popped up on some fun foam. I have the sentiment strip popped up on some fun foam. And of course my focal point image of the Betta is also popped up on fun foam. For my little Betta, I chose to use some reds, which I thought complemented the background really well. For the fourth example, I'm bringing in an embossing folder. Now these are great because they are fairly inexpensive and they add a lot of texture without a whole lot of effort. The embossing folder I'm using today is by Sunny Studios and it's called Dapper Diamonds. It almost creates a lattice type embossing in the cardstock. I've got a piece of Neenah 110 pound cardstock that I'm placing it in the folder, and then I can run it through my Big Shot. I trimmed the panel to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I also popped it up on some fun foam and I've got it adhered to a black card base. In the interest of time, I stamped out all of the color layering rose images off screen, and I will have a list of all of the inks that I used over on my blog, which I will link to down below. After I stamped them out, I die cut them using the coordinating die. I also did ink up some of the leaves, and then I can start arranging those and gluing those in place. The bottom layer I'm adhering directly to the background, and then the purple and the yellow rose I'm adding with some fun foam. Once I have that adhered, all I do is add a couple of those clear drops by Studio Katya to complete this card. For the last card for today, I'm bringing in a Reef Border and Frames Fancy Die by Hero Arts. This is a great die and can be used in a couple of different ways. One way you can use it is to die cut the intricate part of the die from cardstock, which will only cut out the inner part. Another way you can use this die is to use the coordinating frame, oval frame, to die cut the entire panel. For my card today, I'm just using the inner piece, which will die cut just the intricate part of the die. I have a piece of Neenah 110 pound cardstock, and I secured my die using some sticky tape, and then I ran that through my Gemini die cut machine. I found the Gemini to be just a little bit easier to die cut all of those intricate parts of the die, and then I can just pop out the little pieces out with my finger. I am creating a little water scene, so to create that I'm using a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock. Again, I'm taking my life-changing blender brush and Mermaid Lagoon Distress Oxide ink, and then I'm just ink blending the entire panel with that one ink. Once I had that entire panel covered with ink, I took my distress sprayer, which happened to be malfunctioning at the time, and I tried to spray some water on the panel. I did get some nice big spots and I just went with it. Since most of it's going to be covered up, it didn't bother me too much. For this card, I used the Hero Arts Color Layering Sea Turtle, and I used, I believe, 4 different colors of dye ink. I did stamp that off screen, but I will have a link to all of that information down below. I finally settled on stamping the sentiment directly to my panel, and I used a thank you stamp from another stamp set. Once I had that done, I had layered up my panel using some additional cardstock, and then I adhered it in place over my water, and then I popped up a part of my turtle that was going to be sitting into the water, and I have that on fun foam, and then I adhered it in place. I did put an acrylic block on top of my sea turtle in order to weigh it down so that it can completely adhere, and I just left that on there for a couple of minutes. And then for some final touches, I pulled out some crystals, and these are by Studio Katya, called Ocean Wave Crystals, and I've got some across the panel, the white panel, and I also have a few inside the water where the turtle is. Now this was my favorite card of the bunch because I am such a huge fan of sea turtles. They are my favorite sea critter in the bunch. And this card was also inspired by the upcoming World Sea Turtle Day, which happens to be on Father's Day, so this is definitely a card I can use for either one of those 2 events. Anyway, that will complete all of my projects for today. I hope you enjoyed this video and found some inspiration or learned a new tip or 2. I've listed all of the supplies that I used in this video description in case you're interested in any of the products, as well as on my blog linked down below. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed this video and consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this. Thank you so much for stopping by today, and I'll see you next time.